Good. All right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Curriculum Committee of the Board meeting for Monday, October 14th. Is there any public comment on tonight's agenda?
It's currently none at this time.
Great, thank you. Seeing none, let's pass it over to Mrs. Gregg.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We are here, as Ms. Marino just said, October 14th, our Curriculum Committee of the Board meeting. Our agenda this evening, by way of request from the board, we are going to review structured literacy, along with the legislation that has come about and some of the ways that Colonial has been prepared for this. We are also going to talk briefly about our Future Ready Comprehensive Planning, the current cycle that we are in, and then the cycle that we are looking forward to. We do have one policy to talk about for adoption, and then if that does get adopted, a policy for deletion. And we have 2 conference requests for this evening. And at this time, I am going to introduce everyone to the woman on my right, Mrs. Kelly Udovich, who is an assistant principal at Plymouth Elementary School. She has been working closely with Mr. Joe Passetti on our structured literacy and our rollout. Yeah, thank you.
All
Joe's going to start.
So I'll begin, folks. Good evening, everybody. So what we're going to begin with, per request, is just taking a look at where we've come along the way for the past couple of years. This is really year 2.5, if you're keeping count, in terms of our transition to structured literacy. So the state came, if we can go just a little bit to the next slide, please. The state had come out with an adjustment to the PA state code that defined what structured literacy is. And just for everyone's record and edification, effectively what this does is drills down to what we call the body of research known as the science of reading. So there are key components within domains of literacy that the state recommends that pre-service teachers in colleges, as well as all school districts K through 12 adopt over time. Those are in the areas of phonology, of orthography, syntax, morphology, and semantics. So what we have done as a district is a number of different things, everything from professional learning to adjustments in the classroom, to the resources that we've adopted to make sure that we made that shift effectively. The excellent news is that our district has already been engaging in this work and has been for some time based on the strong instruction that we see every single day within our walls. So what I'm going to do next is just briefly go over the professional learning opportunities that we've offered teachers these past few years, and then I'll turn it over to Kelly. So we began this journey in earnest in August 2023, recently after the guidelines had been released by the state. What we had done during that time is we really drilled down to K through 2 in those primary grades to make sure that we were aligning all of our curriculum, which had already included Foundations, which is our phonics program as part of our core, with additional opportunities for skill groups instruction. And Kelly will elaborate on those as we go through this evening. We also had a Foundations launch training for 3rd grade. We are one of the few districts that can proudly say that we offer Foundations K through 3, which is fantastic. We had priorly done that, or in prior years, just K through 2. That extension through 3rd grade, we've seen enormous gains moving up into 4th grade and subsequently into 5th for next year. And then 4th and 5th grade had also been exposed to some knowledge-based training at that time, as well as made some adjustments to the way that they deliver their instruction. We had a best practices fair in November of that same year. During that time, we offered differentiated sessions for participants. So folks could choose what sessions they wanted to go to. That included everything from additional benchmark training to sessions that were specific to independent reading conferences, skills group instruction, based on what the participants were interested in. We also had instruction with benchmark for all K through 3 during that time. And then finally, we had GEODS K through 3. GEODS is a supplement that is known as Decodable Reader, which again, Kelly will go into a little bit more detail with as we move on, but it is a research-based best practice program that we have used for a couple of years now at our sites. February 2024, we focused on rotations for K through 5 rather, and then structured literacy 6 through 8. We began investigating what that looks like in the classroom for the middle grades. As we move into August 2024 and forward, we're continuing to revisit those structured literacy topics K through 5. And right now, the endeavor is to make sure that all of our certificated staff receive that training. The state does dictate that we go by certificate and not by teaching placement. So if you have a K-12 reading specialist at any level, they would receive this training. If you have anybody who has ELD background, they would receive training, so on and so forth. So Kelly's going to dive into more of the granular types of things in terms of what has changed or shifted over time in the district. That we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so as Joe said, we were in pretty good shape when it came to the shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy because we had already had a systematic, explicit program in place for teaching phonics with our students in foundations. We were also addressing a lot of phonics needs during our game blocks. So as you can see, there were really 3 shifts that weren't huge shifts, but they were shifts. So instead of guided reading groups, we switched to what we now call skill groups. Previously, we would level the students based on their BAS scores, but we've come to realize that BAS is a very subjective way of assessing students' reading. And through the BAS, students are able to read through context clues more than through decoding of words. So we now are grouping the kids based on their DIBELS scores, which we've been using. We've been using DIBELS scores, we've been using Linkit for years, but we're now focusing more on their DIBELS scores when we're grouping them for their skills groups.
And DIBELS stands for?
I can't believe you asked me that, but I do know. Dynamic Indicators of Early Literacy Skills. Basic early literacy skills, I forgot the
On that,
Sure.
so what would, if you take the students, take a particular student before the switch and now, so going from guided reading to DIBELS, would that student be in a different group?
So what they were focusing on in the group would probably have looked different. They would be doing it through leveled text rather than what we now are using as decodable text.
Okay.
The decodable text, and I'll go into that a little bit more on another
Sorry.
slide.
Okay, thanks.
But what we saw, and it's right here, so the leveled readers have a heavy focus on predictive text. So students are able to kind of guess at words because of the pictures and the different context clues within the story. Decodable text is based on phonics, which is teachers are picking a decodable text that aligns to the systematic instruction that they've given to their students, depending on what their phonics needs are. So for example, if they need work with R-controlled vowels, the decodable text would have words with R-controlled vowels in them, and it would be, by using the decodable text, we can tell better that the students are really able to transfer that skill rather than just guess at words.
Thanks.
Is that good? Okay.
Thank you.
You can go to the next. So the skills groups, this is what they look like in the classroom. The first thing that teachers are doing is they're analyzing data and creating flexible groups. And the data that they're analyzing now is DIBELS, Linkit, and then we're also using other things. Lexia is one of our online resources that we're using with students. And then just their anecdotal notes, their exit tickets that they're using for students. They're looking at all those different things and trying and seeing where students need to make more progress and where their deficits might be. They analyze this data all the time. We specifically work with them to analyze this data during PLTs. We might be looking at progress monitoring that reading specialists are doing with these students as well to see what other deficits we need to target in these groups. So once they've come up with their groups and what the skills are that they need to address, they plan mini lessons. Some of the mini lessons include decodable books that they'll be using to address the phonics skills. They may use Lexia lessons. Lexia provides you with actual specific lessons that you can do with students based on whatever they find their deficits to be as they're working through the program. And we also use some foundations resources as needed. Students that may have a deficit with fluency and accuracy, teachers will often use passages with them to practice and do some repetitive reading with them to help build their fluency and accuracy. And these groups are also used to address comprehension and enrichment for students that might need that as well. After the mini lesson, they may use an exit ticket to assess understanding. A lot of teachers will also teach a skill explicitly during skills group and then send students off to work independently while they work with another group. During that independent time, the students will work on whatever they were just taught explicitly, and then teachers can also use that to see what growth they've made and if they have to continue with that skill or they can move on to the next skill. Any questions? Okay. So, the buzz. What is a sound wall? So, just a couple of quick facts up there. The English language has 44 speech sounds, also known as phonemes, 26 letters to represent those sounds or phonemes, and 200 different ways to spell those sounds. So we're trying to teach our youngest little ones to learn all of that. Like I just said, a phoneme is the sound you hear in the word. A grapheme is the symbol that's used to represent the phoneme. A sound wall matches our articulation of speech sounds to the letters and what it represents and how it represents those sounds. So, for example, if the word was no, K-N-O-W, on a word wall, no would be placed under K. So when students think that the K sound makes k, they're not going to know how to pronounce no the correct way. On a sound wall, it would be placed under the sound, but it would say KN. So they're now learning that KN can make the sound rather than just memorizing the word. We're giving them more skills to be able to look at words and go to these sound walls and say, okay, there's a whole bunch of different ways. They might not get it right the first time, but they'll practice, and that's how they'll start to be able to learn how to transfer those sounds into their reading and their writing. So why we use sound walls? So it's an instructional tool, right? And it creates opportunities for students to learn many words by transferring their knowledge to the sound grapheme correspondence. Rather than, like I just said, just learning one word, we're teaching them these skills. One thing too that I want to point out, our L teachers and our speech therapists have been using sound walls for quite some time. Sound walls really do help with our L students in the fact it gives them an understanding of the articulations of sounds that may not be found in their home language. So it teaches them the different ways to articulate those sounds as they're learning these words. This also holds true for students that have articulation challenges in speech. Okay, now the fun part. You can go to the next. So this is, at your table, if anybody needs one, there's some extras. You're going to see what our teachers and students are working with right now. Currently, teachers have sound wall posters that they're using to teach sounds. They're using these across the curriculum during teachable moments related to decoding. So during foundations lessons, teachers have been encouraged to relate the sound being taught in foundations to the sound wall. And our wonderful reading specialists throughout the district have actually come up with something for teachers that lists all the sounds and how they can relate it to the sound wall while they're teaching it in foundations. So this is something that all the teachers have received, and they're using that to implement it so that we're making that connection in both ways. Students also have this sound wall map with them at all times in their desks, and they're being encouraged to use it as an instructional tool when they're reading and they're writing independently. So it's not just something they're being taught in a group or by the teacher and then they're just going back to their seats and having to remember. This is something they're encouraged to pull out and use as needed. So the way that the consonants are situated, if you look on this one page, you can see that they're grouped based on where in the mouth the sounds are produced. So for example, p and b are produced in your lips, right? So they're at the front. And then the next block is t and d, they're in your teeth. And then g and k are in your throat. Okay, so it's the progression from front to middle to back. So that's how they are all arranged in this area. And it actually shows you the lips, and the teachers are going through and showing them each of those different areas to kind of help them with that. The next section is the vowel valley, which is also set up based on mouth placement for vowel sounds. The only difference is that all vowel sounds are open and voiced in their production, so we need to bring awareness to the mouth placement during vowel sounds. So it's basically the same thing. It starts up here, and it works its way down, and as you work your way down, your mouth closes more and more and more, and then opens more and more and more as you go through. I'm not going to demonstrate all of that for you, but you can certainly practice at home if you'd like. Any questions about sound walls up to this point?
So sound walls are pretty new for us this
Yes.
year. That has been the focus of the professional learning. And as you can imagine, after hearing Kelly speak about all of this, teaching reading really is rocket science. And it can be intimidating for the teachers. We certainly weren't taught that way, and our teachers were not taught that way. So it has taken a lot of professional learning that Joe and his team have put together for our teachers so that they do feel more confident. We're still growing and we're still working. Again, the Sound Walls is new this year, and we're going to keep emphasizing that.
I appreciate the intention behind all of this. I mean, this is cool. I'm gonna put this up at my own desk because especially with, the front of mouth, middle of mouth, and as you were doing it, I was doing it, and I'm like, oh yeah, we
right?
can use it that way. So this is pretty cool.
And the first time I saw this was in a speech therapist's class when I was doing an observation. And I was like, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Like, and then I started doing it, like you do it to yourself and you're like, wow, really, that's true.
Are there interactive sound walls? Like, can I press something and hear it? Like a Google sort of thing?
I'm sure there
That
are.
will be
So-
next year.
So, yes, they do exist. We do have a couple of teachers that have them on interactive slides right now.
Okay.
It's not something that we've rolled out district-wide, but we have folks that are playing around with them.
And I think our speech and language therapists
Yes.
do that often.
I'm just thinking I'm auditory,
Mhm,
visual as well, so that would really help me too, to be able to press
Sure.
and hear it along the way.
Okay, do you want to move to the next one? Okay, so an additional way that we're going to be monitoring student progress is to track them through their tiers of intervention. And what you can see up here, which is not really that much big enough.
They don't have it.
Oh, you have it all in front of you, okay. So just to give a review, tier 1, students that we put into tier 1 are all students really. The tier 1 is the core classroom instruction that all students are receiving. Students that are in tier 2 have received targeted support and need a little more help than what they're receiving in the core curriculum. So some of that intervention will be coming in their game groups, skill groups as well. And then finally, tier 3 is an intensive individualized support for students who continue to struggle. They're still receiving the core curriculum in tier 1. They're receiving tier 2 intervention. And then in addition to that, they're receiving typically 20 to 30 minutes, 3 days a week of tier 3 instruction based on a specific goal that the student support team has set for them.
Kelly, sorry.
Go ahead.
So in tier 3, the student doesn't have to have an IEP this is for any student, correct?
Yes,
Is that-
correct.
Okay.
When a teacher will bring a student to our student support team and we'll look at all of their data. And typically, and what you'll see on the next slide with our mobility, it's gonna help us with identifying those students. So we look at the students that are not making the progress we would like to see. We look at their progress monitoring. And if we as a team feel like we have smaller specific goals that we need to set for them, or there may be some gaps that we need to fill, then we'll put those students into a tier 3 intervention with a reading specialist where they will target those specific goals for 6 weeks. Then we reconvene, look at their monitoring. If they've met that goal, we can keep them in tier 3 and set a different goal, or we will release them back into tier 2 and catch them up.
So tier 2's in the classroom typically?
Tier 2 is usually during our game intervention time. Yep. But the good thing about it is that with skill groups, those specific skills that we're targeting in game can be carried over into skill groups. And that's how the reading specialists collaborate with our teachers and tell them, they're on the same page about what skills they're teaching, how they can carry over into their skills groups too.
Can you just share real quick, since you mentioned progress monitoring, how often are we progress monitoring our tier 2 and tier 3 friends?
Sure, so tier 3, we progress monitor weekly, and tier 2, we progress monitor every other week.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. The chart up here shows how we're determining which tier students fall into. So, oh, sorry, yeah. One back.
Oh, one back.
So,
No.
no, that one. Yeah, you got it.
Correct.
So if you look at kindergarten and first grade, if you have it in front of you, what we're doing is we're looking purely at DIBELS for these students because we're really focused on their early literacy skills. So students that are benchmark in DIBELS composite scores. Now the composite scores are made up of all of the subtests that the students take. There's a special formula that DIBELS uses, and they will let us know if those students are benchmark, below benchmark, or well below benchmark. Students that are below or well below are considered tier 2 students and will be receiving, interventions based on their specific needs in DIBELS.
So can we talk about some subtests on DIBELS?
Sure can.
Again, this is dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. So it is being able to identify the sound of a letter. It is being able to identify the phonemes in a word. It is being able to identify or read nonsense words. So words that don't make any sense, but we want the children to, again, force their phonics and force sounding out words. Are you able to sound out this nonsense word? And then those skills progress as we go through the grade levels. So kindergarten will not have the same subtests that a third grader does.
No, that's great. So you'll notice that in second grade, we begin to, so the middle of first grade is when oral reading fluency starts to be tested. And they're expected to be able to start reading fluently at their grade level.
Third grade.
No. That's where the subtests get.
Gotcha.
But then third grade is where we begin to look at Link It in addition to the DIBELS. Because we want to also make sure we have a student that's benchmark in DIBELS. We want to make sure that they're also able to comprehend. So we're looking at those Link It scores. So a student that's tier 1 in DIBELS could also be tier 2 in Link It. Any student that is bubble, basic or below basic in Link It will be considered tier 2 in that area. And we'll provide the appropriate intervention as needed.
So when we talk about our Link It assessments, we're talking more of an assessment that is aligned to or mirrors a PSSA. It's reading passages, so it's putting all of those skills together to see, can you read all of this and now understand it? And it's to answer multiple choice and open-ended questions to see.
You're good, it's fine. I know, it's bad, I know. Okay, Nance, next one. And then finally, this is how we'll be looking at our mobility reporting this year. We will be looking at our tier 1 and tier 2 students. As we said just a moment ago, if you look at kindergarten, we currently have 174 students in tier 1, which is 42%. And then we have tier 2 students as 242. I think that's 58%. Reason being, we haven't really taught them anything yet. So we love to look at this mobility report for kindergarten because the hope is that we're going to see a huge jump come the winter once they've been exposed to the curriculum that we're teaching them. If you look down at third grade, there's the DIBELS and the Link It. So right now we're at 379 students are in tier 1 for DIBELS, which is 74%. And 275 students are in tier 1 for Link It. 131 are in tier 2 for DIBELS, which is like 28%. I can't read that.
Yeah.
And then Link It, 228 are tier 2 at 45%. And that's how it goes all the way down to 5th grade. Okay, just so that you could see an example of both of those.
Are these numbers including the special education students as well?
Includes everybody.
Okay.
Yep.
And do we have a breakdown in terms of ethnicity as well?
We can break it down by that. For this slide, we do not have that. Obviously. And then as Kelly said, when you're talking about this mobility report at the end of the year with proper instruction and intervention, ideally you're looking at a triangle if you think about GAIN or RTII. We are looking to get 80 to 85% of our students successful with tier 1 instruction, and then 15% with tier 2, and then 5% with tier 3. So if you look at some of our third grade, where we hope to get in some of that basic early literacy, we are nearing that, right? We're already at 74% in the beginning of the year. So we can see that our shift to structured literacy is impacting our instruction and the success of our students. And we're looking forward to watching it grow even more.
I may have missed this. Where's the tier 3? There's no category of tier 3?
Good question. So tier 3 is monitored at the building level, not the district level. So we will be keeping track of that as a building, which can also be shared. But we didn't put it up there because it's constantly changing, not so much even from the fall to the winter, but it's so fluid in the changing of it that we're setting goals and then releasing kids back into tier 2. But we will certainly keep track of that at our building levels.
So roughly though, as a percentage, say for grade 3, that 26% for Dibbles is 100% of the non-tier 3 kids.
Well,
Which-
the other reason it's not in there, Mark, is because those tier 2 kids are also tier 3 kids. So it would muddy your calculations. But yes, what you're saying is we have tier 1, tier 2. Some of the tier 2 kids need additional, so they're also tier 2 at the same time.
That's always the case?
Always the case.
They're
Yeah.
still getting,
You're not replacing their interventions with additional interventions, you're adding them on top. So they're getting even more support, nothing in place of. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
that's
And
all.
how long have you been tracking, like, this specific group of kids?
This is our first year with the mobility report. Now that we're 2.5 years into the structured literacy, we're hoping to really see the gains this year.
Right.
No pun intended, but yeah, the progress this
So
year.
this is, but in previous years, you've had other assessments to do.
We still track all the data, but we have not been as explicit as this because again, we are looking forward to this. And then what Kelly didn't mention is that, so this spreadsheet would be broken down by schools. So you're looking at this district level. By school, we also have all the students listed by tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which leads into the next part of what she's going to talk about, going into tier 1 to tier 2. We've been working together a long time, so she knows I always take over and start talking. Go.
So the hope is that, what am I talking
The
about?
tier 2 to tier 1, we know who those kids are. Well, we have their names attached.
So
Yeah.
we're looking at each school's gonna have our own, so I'm at Plymouth Elementary, so I'm looking at that list. I have students by name. I'm looking at the tiers that they're in, and then once our mid-year data comes in, I'm looking to see where that, Kelly Udovich is. So Kelly Udovich was in tier 2, now she's in tier 1. So that's great, she's made that shift. So we're looking at the specific students because the reason we wanna look at it that closely is we wanna make sure that none of those tier 1 kids are moving to tier 2, right? So if a couple tier 2 kids move up and a couple tier 1 kids move down, you won't really see that in the mobility. So you have to actually track it by specific student. So that's what we're gonna be doing at the building level. Any questions?
And the plan, so the goal obviously is for people to move up.
Correct.
Or back, no, whatever. One
I
being
mean,
the
yeah,
highest,
tier 1.
whichever way we look at it. So if for whatever reason a student does go from 1 to 2, what is the plan for that particular student as far as we're getting halfway through the school year? What's the plan for that student?
Yeah, so if that happens in our building, we go through the data. We'll look through the data, the mid-year data at PLT. We'll look at the specific student. We'll take into account, anything. I mean, by that point, we know most of our students. So we'll look at their data and we'll see where they fell out. We'll see the interventions that they were in previously. And we'll see why, we can look deep into the data and look at specific standards and look at specific questions. If we feel like that student is struggling or is needing some additional intervention, we will certainly bring them up to our student support team. We'll put goals in place for them. Just because they come to student support doesn't mean they need to be tier 3. We can set goals for them and then keep them on our radar, meet up again, and hopefully they've made the progress. But we always have a plan in place for those students, and we look very closely at any student that falls from one tier back to another.
So essentially, every student will have an IEP, so to speak, for individual, based on where they are, with the interventions.
Well, we're addressing specific
Not
skills
an
that they
IEP,
need.
like an official IEP,
Yeah.
but you're doing an individualized education plan for
Yep.
each kid, so I don't mean this.
I know what you mean.
IEP.
And the whole goal of this, Chris, is to not have an IEP. We
Right.
intervene early with practices like this. And even though we are using this for the first year tracking, the practices that Kelly just described, we've been doing for years. So nothing is changing in that way. We're always going to be looking at their data, always looking at their rate of improvement, and always adjusting based on that. But yes, ultimately, our goal is to not have a child with an IEP, but to give them that same level of intervention without that.
Right.
Yep.
So I guess my other question is, so now that we're tracking it this way, how much administrative time is it for teachers to do this tracking versus what they were doing previously?
They're not doing
They're
it at
not
all.
doing it.
We're doing Lori Jolly, who is an amazing administrative assistant. Again, we have had all the systems in place. We have had all of these data warehouse, all the data points collected. It's a matter of copying and pasting it. And Ed Merck put in all these percentages in this spreadsheet, 'cause I don't know how to do that either. But yes, it's all already completely finished, and we just drop in the names and the calculations work. So it's nothing additional on the teachers. They're continuing to do everything that they've always done.
It'll be a benefit for them because they'll just be able to look at it,
Yeah,
right?
no, that's right.
At our
Yeah.
data meetings, it'll be there for them and they'll be able to see their kids and how they did and where they went.
So while this is going on, are we, I assume we're reassessing like where our reading specialists might need to move around, right? Like, I mean, not that they will need to move around, but if they need, based on the needs of where the kids are that have the needs.
Yes,
for
we
that.
typically have our supports aligned to the needs in those buildings. Yes.
Can I say a couple quick comments and questions? One is thank you, first of all,
Yeah.
for such a proactive approach to the science of reading and structured literacy. I know we've been talking about this presentation for a while, and I'm really excited that you got a chance to share it. Thank you, Kelly, for your very explicit and hands-on sharing of this work. So just three quick wonderings. One is, so the sound walls are, a shift. It's kind of like where we're headed this year. How are we getting the feedback from the teachers on the kinds of supports that they'll need as they continue forward in this space? That's one.
So the one thing that we're doing, Sharon, is making sure that we've realigned the way that we meet with our reading specialists. So again, I can't thank Kelly enough for the support that she helps co-coordinate with me and the literacy teams that we have in each building to help support that. So what we do is we have building-based meetings, both at the building level, that I will push into for each of those K-5 buildings. And then in addition to that, we also have time during PLT where I meet with the reading team and a couple of other teachers potentially. Kelly will be involved in that process as well to help refine based on what they're hearing from teachers. We also administer surveys after professional learning sessions to elicit that feedback. But we also rely heavily on their anecdotal evidence based on their push into classrooms so we can make sure that we're developing those tools and pushing them out appropriately.
Great, and I imagine your observations and walkthroughs and informals and all the fun things are aligned to what you're focusing on, so
Sure.
thank you. Other quick question is, again, since this is new, would love to see periodically an update on where we are, specifically with the subgroups, since that is an area of focus that we've talked about before and we continue to talk about, if that's possible. And then when you're looking at this from the school lens and you're looking at the students and you're seeing the students' names, do you have like an attendance column that comes into play there on that same data sheet?
We have our own attendance. Yes, we keep track of attendance. So we keep track of the attendance, obviously as a building, but then also within interventions and tier 3 interventions. That's part of the data that our reading specialists collect when they're seeing students, because we want students to have attended those
Right.
interventions to
Right.
make sure that they've actually worked.
Can't say it's
But
not
yes,
working.
that's definitely something, and especially in our student support team, that's a big part of it. Typically, if a student has an attendance issue, we've already brought them to our care team, so we've been kind of dealing with it and working with the family at that point.
Great. I'll be really curious to see how this progresses from that lens of attendance.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Thank you again so
Sure,
much.
yeah.
All of you, thank you. Other questions or comments about this? I guess you have more, right?
Just
Everybody
thank
pretty
you.
good on this?
Thank you.
Yes, really
Thank you.
informative, thank you.
So we're gonna head into the future ready comprehensive planning. As you are aware, we are now in our third year of our 2022 to 2025 comprehensive plan. And I just wanted to provide you with some more progress monitoring information about the goals. We meet often as an administrative team to discuss these. Our administrative retreat in August also focused on our comp plan as we enter into year 3. So the 6 goals we're going to go over here were directly related from our comp plan. Our target for year 2 was that 75% of our lessons explicitly communicate learning intentions and success criteria. Progress monitoring for year 2, we are already at 96%. Our year 3 goal we set was 95%. So we are doing well in that area. When we talk about where we do get this progress monitoring data from, principals give this to us and did give us all of this information collected from, we use PAETEP, which is a warehousing system for all of our observations and walkthroughs. So principals can directly gather that information for our progress monitoring. Again, we had focused on our clarity for learning, and we had said for the goal for year 2, 75% of our students are going to be able to articulate what they are learning, why they are learning it, and how they have learned it. Again, through walkthroughs, just walking up into a classroom and asking the students those 3 questions. Joe created a walkthrough form specifically for that last year that really helped with our administrators and our supervisors going into the classrooms. And it was just check boxes, quick and easy progress monitoring. 93% of our students are at that level. And again, that goal is 95% for year 3. So we are well on our way for that. SPMs are student progress measures, and each of our classroom teachers set those in the beginning of the year for each of the students in their classroom. So they're given a measure to choose from. How are they going to assess whether or not students are growing throughout the year, and what kind of assessment are they going to use? They submit that into their principals probably this month. And then they are assessed at the end of the year. Did that student grow at the rate that they were going to with all the interventions and the tier instruction that we put into place? So we had set a goal for 85% of our students will meet or exceed that, with our final goal of 90% of our students, and we are currently at 88. So another point of pride with our targets. The next slide shows us, you got there? Okay, 85% of our students, again, SPMs, but this time the focus was on that positive school environment, the welcoming. So we bring in more of our what's Melissa's survey? All of our surveys.
PSSM.
Yes, PSSM, Psychological Sense of School Membership Survey, thank you. So that's where we bring in this in our EIB committee work. So this is also yet another measure. Again, we're at 88%, so we are doing well. Next one was 90% of administrators will identify areas of growth in their observations. We are at 97%, so we are crushing that goal. And the last one is the one that we will be focusing on for this last year. And it was that, do we have walkthrough observations that are scheduled for our teachers after we meet with them? We meet with them and we discuss, this is how we can get better at the craft of teaching. Do we have those walkthroughs to see how they are doing? Again, our buildings, it's a great school district, but things do happen and teachers and principals are busy. So this is a focus for us this year. And as you can see, this is the only goal that we still have to master. So we're doing quite well.
Yay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, he's right. We celebrated a
No, I
lot.
was just excited.
No, ditto, congratulations.
One thing to add that's somewhat connected to this is that Rose Rock and her staff, specifically her media specialist Tyrone, they have worked together to develop, I don't even know what to call it, an app, or it's pretty amazing. So through our partnership with Temple, they've put together, we have an iPad where Ann sits, and so if families come in, and last week we had a family come in from out of the country, they can tap on their flag and immediately hit, like, what are you looking for? How can we answer your questions? And so
It went really, really well.
yeah, we're just piloting it at CES, and then we'll spread it out to all the schools. But it's access to services, access to supports, access to, this particular family was looking to register. They had just moved to the area, and it was great. And so we'll have them at a future meeting. But kudos to Rosemary's team and Rose Rock and her staff for taking that and taking the initiative on it. And she's going to push it out to all the other buildings. few kinks to work out. I think we have about 19 different languages in Wendy Kleckner's class.
She's
So-
also gonna be highlighting this at the EIB meeting next week, so don't
Well,
take
there
it
you
away.
go. It's a little teaser.
Teaser.
But it was really,
Amazing.
it's,
Yes.
just connected to, that Rosemary and her team have been champions of our EIB, specifically Belonging Initiative. And so that's a great example of what we're doing.
Access.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for providing
Very
access to our
So let the planning begin. Believe it or not, it's hard to believe that, did I interrupt you, Gail? Did you?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm good.
So it's time to start planning again. So we start this process a year before. So we are currently
Starts tomorrow.
planning for the 2025 to 2028 comprehensive plan. We did send out a Google form asking those to sign up, so thank you if you did that. Our first steering committee meeting is going to be on October 24th, where the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit will come back and help us work our way through our mission, our vision, our values, so that we can start the planning. And it'll be great. And then we'll come back again as a steering committee. So then after that, we'll divide into our subgroups, complete our needs assessments, develop the plan. And then in January, the steering committee will come back together again with the IU. We will go through everything together as a team and make sure we all feel great about it before we present it to the board. So that's what we have to look forward to there. Any questions on future ready comp planning? Great. Policies. So as I started, we have 2 policies to go over this evening. Policy 907 is in draft form, but that is the policy that we're asking the board to consider for adoption. This policy is called School Visitors Policy. It basically uses PSBA's policy language. It is a recommended policy. It has updated language that is now in compliance with state regulations. So it's very similar to the policy we currently have active right now, but it has more state regulations. It also has added language regarding the military. So the military does very infrequently visit our schools, just like we do for our colleges. We do have our military that come visit our students at PW. They go through the same procedures that any college would. So this language is also in compliance, in statutory compliance. So we are looking forward to that. This policy was also reviewed by Tim McDonald as our safety and security officer. We did slightly change some of the language. It said that visitors would come and check in the main office. As you know, you've been in our buildings. They don't go to the main office. They use the Raptor system, right? So we did change some language together, but kept most of PSBA's language. So we are asking the board to delete policy 122. Again, has most of the same exact information if policy 907 is adopted.
Rosemary, quick question about the
Yes.
military. So you specifically gave an example with the military, would treat it same as college. Is that the only reason a military
Comes to visit.
comes to
Yes.
comes to
So
visit?
when I
I'm trying to
asked
figure
Dr.
the language
Bacani
out.
that question, because I anticipated I would ask that, he said yes, they pretty much just come to the school. Sometimes they do special events, but they mostly work with the counseling office in Beth Lynch in particular.
And do we have ROTC program?
We don't,
We don't have a program, ROTC
it
program?
would be a junior ROTC.
Yeah,
I don't think
we
so.
do not have an ROTC program here.
We do not.
So we would push this policy for Monday for first read if, anybody else have any other questions or thoughts about it? All right. Then the last thing on our agenda this evening are conference requests. We have 2 conference requests, and I'm not so sure if they're gonna take place in St. Pete's. I know, I didn't wanna bring it up. But these conferences are in St. Pete, Florida. They are for our IB program.
They may or may not.
Correct. So perhaps I'll be coming
I think
back
they
and
will.
asking for a change in the venue of where these are taking place. But this workshop is a requirement training to continue to offer IB in our high school. And basically this one is how to integrate service learning into our communities in an effective way. So Mary Rems and Becky Duffy are asking to attend this conference.
The board budgets this as part of our school improvement process annually, so it's not additional to what's already built into the budget, and it's actually part of the collective bargaining agreement with CEA as well. So it's an appropriate use of funds, and Becky and Mary have done a great job with the IB program. We're up to our 3rd or 4th class, and it's growing. It's really done well.
Sounds good. Any questions about the conference request or anything?
I do, I wanna circle back, if you don't mind, to the,
Go.
to Kelly's presentation. So you talked about the differences in the reading and what it looked like before and what it looks like now, and, but, it was also mentioned that it will affect the writing portion as well, like how we do our writing with the kids.
So the one part that we mentioned was like the sound walls. These are things that they can use for their independent writing when they're trying to like sound out a word. They should be able to look at this instructional tool to be
Right.
able to help them with that. As far as the changes, did I mention anything about that? I don't remember if I did.
That was really the only change
I
again.
think that was the only thing with writing that we really talked about, yeah.
Okay, well, because you said the standards, and there were like 3 portions of the whole thing, and
And actually, if so one of the areas where you would see a shift in writing practice would be mostly at the 4th through 8th level.
Okay.
Mostly in 6th through 8, where you typically didn't have like a station rotation type of model. We're implementing a lot of those structures in our ELA classes up at the middle school, particularly focused on things like fluency, being able to read a passage out loud accurately. Or, when it comes to the writing piece, that's where students would be engaging more of a workshop type of model to approach the writing.
With this, what we're doing, K to 3, then build upon the text-dependent analysis the kids have to do in middle and high school.
Yes, absolutely.
thanks.
Not the writing.
Right, or what they write, or, okay. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
Good. Any other questions? Any other board comment? Any public comments?
Currently none at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Just again, thank you so much. This is super exciting. My heart is just so filled with happiness tonight. So just thank you for all of that, and have a great evening, everyone. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Yay.